brother was the greatest. I don't think you can ever get over such a loss.
Wow, it's just one fucking problem after another. You guys are incredible. Just pathological.
Monarch butterflies
Wow.
migrate 5,000 kilometers from eastern North America to this corner of the Mexican state of Michoacan, where they spend the winter. They always manage to find the same area of lush forest across generations. In 2017, we came to visit Homero Gomez. He'd made it his life's mission to protect the monarchs. It's amazing to host this natural wonder. We're really proud that the world's largest colony comes here. It's unique. When we walk through the forest, it's an indescribable feeling. We protect them day and night. The butterflies have chosen an enchanted place. Why do the butterflies need protecting? Because logging, much of it illegal, is devastating the forests of Michoacan. There's strong timber from the US and China. Avocado growers want to clear more land. Gomez and his colleagues organized patrols to prevent illegal logging, which proved successful. He had such good ideas to protect the butterflies and help our community. He started many projects. For example, he said, let's plant new trees. And we all agreed and said, yes, Homero, let's do that. 2 weeks after Homero disappeared, his body was found floating in an agricultural pond here. There was a wound on the back of his head. Amado had the dismal task of identifying the corpse.
La verdad es que una angustia, una desesperación.
To be honest, I felt fear and anguish. I was nervous at the thought that it could be my brother. I prayed silently, please let it not be him. After searching for 16 days, I didn't want to find him dead.
Lo menos que yo quería era encontrarlo muerto.
But it was Homero. Those 16 days of uncertainty had also been agonizing for his wife and their 4 children.
They were beside themselves. They cried. They called for their father. It was painful and frightening. I wanted to cry out. Where are you?
Public prosecutors have so far failed to identify any suspects or likely motive. Homero's wife, Rebecca, is certain that it was not an accident. She thinks his environmental activism made him enemies and that he was murdered. Conservationists fear others will now be too scared to get involved in protecting the forests and the butterflies. Whatever the reason was, timber, a personal vendetta, avocados, it's better to know what happened than live with the uncertainty.
America, what?
But will the case ever be solved? Homero Gomez was known as a kind and caring man who saw butterflies as a gift of nature. This butterfly makes us very happy because it gives us life, income, and a way to preserve the forest.
I almost fucked a guy up for almost stepping on a fucking butterfly that was right.
The chances aren't good. 98% of all killings in Mexico never get solved.
I'll kill you in front of that kid. I'll give a fuck. You're lucky you didn't step on it then. I wouldn't be on these 3 charges.
There are activists like Homero Gomez all around the world. In Africa, too, many people are working hard to protect local wildlife, including in the continent's safari parks. It's a balancing act. What do the animals need to thrive? How many tourists can they cope with? Right now, South Africa has a strict coronavirus lockdown in place. Safari tours are off the cards, but we headed to the eastern part of the country, home to the famous Kruger National Park. Next to it is the Mala Mala Game Reserve, which is doing all it can to survive the current crisis. They're on patrol around the clock. Since the lockdown, the field rangers from the Mala Mala Wildlife Reserve have even spent the night out in the bush to guard the animals. The reserve offers some of the most luxurious safaris in southern Africa, drawing thousands of tourists every year. Since the lockdown, the animals have been largely alone, and criminal poaching gangs know it. They're keen to exploit the situation. More recently, animals that sell well for their meat have also become a target. Mala Mala lies in one of South Africa's poorest regions, and the rangers are concerned about the situation in the villages surrounding the reserve.
The pandemic has put many people out of work. They have no money, and many are hungry. We're worried that they'll break into the reserve and kill animals for their meat.
The wild animals also sense that something has changed. Gone are the sounds of vehicles and tourists. Some residents of the park have lost their fear completely and are coming much closer to the camp than normal.
You should open it up for free.
Vusi Mpanza is the general manager at the Mala Mala Reserve. Now he's holding the fort back at the camp. When the rangers return, he tells them about fresh tracks from their latest visitor. An elephant paid a visit in the night and damaged a number of trees.
It's a nature reserve and it's a safari.
The reserve was once privately owned, but 2013 saw a historic land restitution case in which the government bought up the area and gave it back to local residents. Now the land and buildings belong to 11 local communities who also hold a stake in the company that operates Mala Mala. The firm pays rent to the local community and provides training to residents. The reserve employs 180 people, many of them from the local area, but few are currently working. With the onset of the coronavirus restrictions, the reserve lost its income. Nearly all the staff were sent home.
And we don't know how long that is going to last. And so for them as well, like the staff, they're so worried that might not even come back, you know. So it's even for those who are in camp, you know, if the company doesn't operate at all, might as well close it down. And all of us, and we're feeding a lot of families, you know, a lot of families are depending on, maybe one person working here is feeding like 10 people at home or more than that.
So how you proceed?
Every day, Vusi Mpanza speaks to his boss online. She's doing all she can to secure additional funding. So far, his staff have received unemployment benefit from the state. They're also getting a small amount of money from Mala Mala on top, so that each one has enough to live on.
Initially, the temporary employee relief scheme was only for a period of 3 months. However, we are hoping that for industries such as tourism, the government who recognize and see the importance of tourism in South Africa will continue to at least assist the tourism industry and the hospitality industry, which has been hardest hit.
Vusi Mpanza and Ranger Lucky Mapukula are heading out to Kildare village to deliver face masks and other items to guard against the coronavirus. Kildare is one of the 11 villages that submitted a claim under the restitution.
By Charles D. Livingston. The part of Sergeant Preston is played by Paul Sutton. They are brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at the same time by Quaker Pup Wheat and Quaker Pup Rice, the breakfast cereal shot from guns. Listen Friday when Sergeant Preston and Yukon King meet the challenge of the Yukon in the case of the hard-hearted hermit.
I knew that Amos Benbow was not as hard-hearted as he pretended to be, so I thought it'd be all right to leave his granddaughter with him. I thought she'd be safe. I didn't suspect that bank robbers would choose his home as a hideout. That was when the trouble began.
Be sure to hear this exciting adventure Friday. This is J. Michael wishing you goodbye, good luck, and good health from Quaker Puff Wheat.
You're listening to Chin Radio AM
And Quaker Puff Rice.
the voice of
Quaker Puff,
multicultural
you left out
Toronto,
the rice.
bringing you the latest updates on COVID-19. Stay informed, stay safe, and stay tuned to Chin Radio AM 1540.
Now, as gunshots echo across the wind-swept, snow-covered reaches of the wild Northwest, Quaker Puff Wheat and Quaker Puff Rice, the breakfast cereal shot from guns, present the challenge of the Yukon. It's Yukon King, swiftest and strongest lead dog of the Northwest, blazing the trail for Sergeant Preston of the Northwest Mounted Police in his relentless pursuit of lawbreakers. One king, one gold, gold discovered in the Yukon. A stampede to the Klondike in the wild race for riches. Back to the days of the gold rush. With Quaker Puff Wheat and Quaker Puff Rice, bringing you the adventures of Sergeant Preston and his wonder dog, Yukon King, as they meet the challenge of the Yukon.
It's not a good puff, it's puffed. We puffed it up. Like, what does it mean? Puff of smoke turns into a puff of rice. Oh dear. I can't.
Yes, all aboard for a breakfast treat that can't be beat.
Jesus.
Tomorrow morning, treat yourself to the breakfast cereal shot from guns. That's the one and only
story. Fucking hell.
Making these films so that we can bring wildlife to our home because of the COVID-19 that you cannot able to come and enjoy it, right? It is around 8 Mala.
The rangers have had a good day. Later on, they spot another leopard. They're really hoping the tourists will be able to return soon, bringing desperately needed income to safeguard the future of the Mana Mana Game Reserve.
Put the cap on and do yellow.
That's all from us at Global 3000 this week. We're curious to know what you liked about this week's show. Drop us a line to global3000@dw.com. See you next time. Take care.
You got to keep people moving to that park if those animals aren't safe. Did you not realize that was half of what the fucking money coming in was?
I'm fine.
It's not money. It's
I live in
animals.
Today I'm going to show you my day in the down.
Jesus Christ.
Well, one thing again, they're the most beautiful places to be, but also one of the most threatened ecosystems. And so specialized in studying the impacts that humans are having on those ecosystems by overfishing, by habitat loss and things like that. And then kind of gradually through my studies also just got more and more involved in talking and writing about the oceans and using that as a platform to try and tell more people about this wonderful place, but also the problems that it faces.
Helen Scales and Samira Rafaela are our guests on this edition of Weekend. Now, the situation in Yemen is not improving. While other countries argue about vaccines to counter the coronavirus pandemic, Yemen is in the midst of a civil war and the country is desperately short of food. David Beasley is Executive Director of the UN World Food Programme, and he's just returned from Yemen. On Thursday, he gave an impassioned report on his mission at a UN Security Council meeting on conflict and hunger around the world.
Around 400,000 children may die in Yemen this year without urgent intervention. That is roughly out every 75 seconds. So while we're sitting here, every minute and a quarter, a child's dying. Are we really going to turn our backs on them and look the other way? Like a 5-month-old little girl shows you. I was in her room 2 days ago where she was lying in the arms of her mother on the verge of death, and I talked to her mother, who told me that in desperation, she had sold the only canister of cooking gas she had so that she could pay for the day's journey to the hospital to get her to get help for her daughter. Well, I hate to tell you, but an hour and a half ago she died. And what about all the other families going through this hell? What they have sold what? Only to be denied care when they arrive because of the lack of beds? To add to all of their misery, the innocent people of Yemen have to deal with a fuel blockage. a fuel blockade. For example, most hospitals only have electricity in their intensive care units because fuel reserves are so low. I know this firsthand because I walked in the hospital and the lights were off, electricity was off. The people of Yemen deserve our help. That blockade must be lifted as a humanitarian act. Otherwise, millions more will spiral into crisis. And bottom line on Yemen, we need money, lots of it. And above all, we need the war to end.
David Beasley of the World Food Programme, and he was referring to a blockade on fuel which the Saudis have imposed on Yemen's main port in the north, Hodeidah, since the start of this year. The Saudis say such supplies help the rebel Houthi forces who control Hodeidah and who are fighting Yemen's internationally recognized government, which is now operating in exile from the Saudi capital, Riyadh. Lise Doucette is the BBC's chief international correspondent, and she has this assessment of the situation in Yemen.
When President Biden came into office in January, he said that ending the war in Yemen was a priority, and he appointed a new highly regarded envoy, Tim Lenderking, a very experienced diplomat on the Yemen file, to be his man on the ground. So Tim Lenderking and the United Nations envoy Martin Griffiths, who's British, have been going to all the major players, to Iran, to Saudi Arabia, to the United Arab Emirates, talking about them, about the need to end this war, also talking to Yemenis. So there is a greater push to end the war in Yemen. But sadly, as sometimes happens in conflicts, the war sometimes has to get worse, tragically, before it gets better. And this week, there's been bombing of Sana'a, the capital, which is in control of the Houthis, the rebels who control large swathes of Yemen now. The Houthis themselves have been pushing forward on the ground to take more territory. So you'd be forgiven for thinking, well, just a minute, isn't everyone just talking about peace? But why is there more war on the ground? Why are more people suffering? So that is this horrible paradox of this situation in Yemen now. And I have to say that of all the countries in conflict that I visit, I have never seen such skeletal, emaciated children as you see in northern Yemen. It is simply beyond your worst imagination and beyond anything that anyone, any child, any family should have to live with.
Lise Doucette there, our chief international correspondent. It's 6:42 GMT. This is Weekend. It's the BBC World Service. Now, the television interview that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, or Harry and Meghan, if you prefer, gave to Oprah Winfrey for the Harpo Productions Company has undoubtedly reverberated around the world. Most shocking, perhaps, was Meghan's claim that there were racist concerns in the royal household about the skin colour of her first child, Archie.
In those months when I was pregnant, all around this same time, so we had in tandem the conversation of he won't be given security, he's not going to be given a title, and also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
What? And you're not going to tell me who had the conversation?
I think that would be very damaging to them.
Prince William, Harry's elder brother and second in line to the British throne, rejected the idea the royal family was racist when asked about the claims by reporters.
Sir, have you spoken to your brother since the interview? No, I haven't spoken yet, but I will do. And can you just let me know, is the royal family a racist family, sir? No, we're very much not a racist family.
You can just about hear him saying there, we're very much not a racist family. The interview has prompted some soul-searching in the 16 countries in the Commonwealth where the Queen is head of state. Australia's former Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, has said, people are saying Harry's left the royal family, why can't we do the same? He thinks that when the Queen dies, that's the moment Australia should sever its ties with the UK and become a republic. Matthew Tukaki is Executive Director of the New Zealand Maori Council, which represents the interests of the indigenous Maori population of New Zealand, where the Queen is also head of state, and he joins us on the line now. Welcome, Matthew. Is it a surprise to you that someone might say that a member or members of the royal family could be racist?
No, look, I think we've been dealing in this as Indigenous First Nations peoples around the Commonwealth for a long time. If you have a look at the way that Māori in particular have been treated in the relationship with the Crown under the Treaty of Waitangi, going right back to 1840. A lot of that grief is unresolved, and even though the current government in New Zealand is making incredible strides, I agree with Malcolm Turnbull, who I also know, and when the Queen passes on, it is a useful time now to have that conversation.
Malcolm Turnbull's a well-known Republican. He doesn't represent all of, that goes without saying, he doesn't represent all of public opinion in Australia. Where does public opinion lie in New Zealand on the monarchy, do you think?
Well, I think there are two things. Number one, we're still dealing with a global pandemic, and New Zealand has been very fortunate to have escaped the brunt of it. However, Māori in particular have deep memories, and we were greatly impacted by the 1919 Spanish flu. So we're still dealing with an epidemic that has significant economic implications for all New Zealanders, and I think really all New Zealanders, or the majority of them, would be wanting to have this conversation. But when we get through this, this period of our lives, I mean, we're still yet to see our borders open to any meaningful international travel. We still have great restrictions. We have a housing crisis in this country. We have one of the highest suicide rates per head of population amongst the Western democracies, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't belie the fact that we should not begin this conversation. The reality is Queen Elizabeth, as incredible as she has been, in her leadership of the Commonwealth, the reality is we're like teenagers, the Commonwealth, where many of us are wanting to move out of home, get our own digs, and plot our own course forward.
I seem to have vivid mental pictures of lots of members of the royal family turning up in New Zealand and rubbing noses with people. Patronising? Yeah. Is there a Maori take on the monarchy?
Oh, there is a Māori take on the monarchy, absolutely. I mean, we have some people, in fact, very many of our people who would very much want to see the days of the Crown come to an end. But then again, we have a unique relationship around the world. We're the only Indigenous First Nations peoples with a treaty between Māori and the Crown. But no doubt that many of us very much want to see that conversation occur. I mean, the hongi and when the royals turn up in New Zealand, they very much are akin to Māori culture. They've been deeply respectful, and even one of our own brothers, so to speak, is married one of the Queen's offspring. And so it's not as if we don't have those familial ties. But but what's happened in case of also Meghan and Harry and what's happened with William and Kate and the whole royal family, I think they need to work on their own whānau, or in Māori terms, family, and let us get on with the bigger pictures of our future.
Okay, will you stay put a moment while I just get a quick take from our guests on the programme on this, on whether this will make the Commonwealth countries less likely to accept the monarchy in the future? Samira?
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, first of all, I was a little bit, I was shocked when of course, seeing the interview, because of some statements, right? And what I think in general is that this interview also shows that we're still having these automatic reflections in all kinds of institutions. The moment the status quo is being questioned, or the status quo is going to change because of other people with other perspectives and backgrounds joining these institutions.
But if you're frustrated that we're still having these conversations, why on earth are you shocked? What's shocking? Surely you saw all this coming.
Yes, but it's still shocking in 2021, and I really want it to be over, because what I really hoped was also in a specific situation here that diversity would be celebrated, because it really looked in the beginning, especially, I still remember their wedding. We were all watching their wedding in the Netherlands here.
That's right.
It was beautiful, diversity was celebrated.
Sorry, I've got to move it on because I want to get back to Matthew. Helen, briefly, Meghan was a golden opportunity for the royal family, wasn't she?
Oh, absolutely. And even in this case just now, I mean, I think for me, the really sad part of this is that the the Queen in the last few days, or the monarchy, the representations of that family didn't stand up and take the chance to publicly condemn racism. It was the perfect opportunity for them to take that public stance. But no, they pulled it into the family and said, we're going to deal with it ourselves. And I think if they had taken that chance to really speak about this, that would have been quite a powerful thing to do, but that chance was missed.
Matthew, could the Queen finally have put it right? Could she have put a lid on this by saying the kind of things that Helen's just suggested?
Oh, look, of course, any apology, any recognition of racism from any leader around the world is helpful to our cause. I mean, not a day goes by that I don't get reports from especially Māori teenagers from around the country who are facing, derogatory comments and racism. Today, we are recognising the mosque attacks in Christchurch. And so, racism is something that's inbuilt for us in New Zealand. But in order to move forward, we must now have a conversation about not just the future of New Zealand, but the future of the Treaty of Waitangi between Māori and the Crown, or what might replace it. And as to the family affairs, it breaks my heart to see any family in a mess like this. We call it hoha in New Zealand, nonsense in other words, where division is beginning to creep into family life. So I wish them all the best, but at the end of the day, it's time for all of us to focus on the big issues around the world, in our own countries, survive this pandemic, and at the same time plot our course forward. Let's hit the reset. Let's not hit the reset button. Let's go and push a big new green button of diversity, of empowerment of Indigenous peoples, and that includes our people.
Nice message. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. Matthew Tukaki, Executive Director of the New Zealand Maori Council. 51 minutes past the hour, while the focus recently in terms of space exploration has been on a rover on Mars. What might we learn from a mission to the outer planets beyond the asteroid belt? A new book, The Mission, A True Story.
Demetrio Martins oversaw 25 drug dealing venues as the right-hand man of a major drugs boss. Fights with rivals were bad enough, but attacks by the military police were even worse. A hit team caught him by surprise one morning.
I was walking down a steep alley when I noticed I'd walked into a trap. They started to shoot. I fell. I was in shock. My bodyguards ran off.
Since then, Demetrio has been paralyzed from the waist down. Nowadays, he spends his days going around the favelas preaching and trying to get gangsters to reform. His own story is well known, a bad man who found God and the path of virtue. Many people here find it moving. He often talks to the dealers hanging out on street corners here. They seem to accept him, and they pray together. Even those who carry a hand grenade with them, just in case.
The government needs to create opportunities for the kids here, so they don't just make the obvious choice and become dealers. They'll lose their freedom, or even their lives.
Those who choose to go clean and renounce crime are relatively few in number. Wagner de Oliveira is one of them. He got his first revolver when he was just 15.
Past or right in middle age type thing, kind of look back, what mistakes did I ever make type thing? And what things drove me nuts? What kind of tragedies did I have and didn't handle properly as far as my emotional state goes? And then let's bring it right to this day right now. All the troubles that people are having, the frustrations, it's now become almost pervasive in the narrative out there and the ideologies out there about how mental health is really, because of COVID, because of the pandemic. Well, people are really struggling with their positions in life right now. And for good reason. This has completely disrupted pretty much the whole world. And
right.
We don't know what's going to happen next. And so we kind of have to reevaluate ourselves in some ways, which now takes me back to, for me, the lyrics in some of those songs. Get back on your feet. You're the one they can't beat, and you know it. So maybe rethink about your strategies at this point going forward because of whatever, and be grateful for what you did accomplish in your life.
I love that. Hey, Ian, thank you so much for the call. I think those were some powerful messages to share here tonight with our listeners.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's a nice, peaceful, quiet night at Departure Bay there, and I'm just sitting here enjoying your show. Thank you very much.
You got it. That's Ian in Nanaimo at Departure Bay. Love it. And I think those messages are all timeless. In the 70s and the 80s, man.
Then I found God, and then I was released. Now I shall always walk with God.
Other congregants find such
She was a late career scientist. She didn't go back to school until she was an adult. She was an office supply saleswoman for quite a bit of time in England. And she decided she wanted to maybe give something else in life a shot. So she enrolled at the Open University and found that, hey, I'm pretty good at the science business. She would go on to become one of the most important planetary scientists in the world. There's John Culberson, a Texas Tea Party Congress, who is certainly not the sort of person that you would picture getting on board with this sort of high stakes, high science adventurism, but would actually become enamored with the prospect of finding the second Garden of Eden at the bottom of this alien ocean. And he would, in fact, become its benefactor. And there's Bob Papalardo, a breezy former professor who decided to throw his career in the air and see if he could convince NASA to do this thing. The diversity of people speaks to...
You're wrong with your leader, aren't you, fella? I see, boy. Passing a note to your collar. To Inspector King.
And get thrown to Jupiter. In all, it's going to take about 6 years to get there.
Oh, it's fucking Saturday afternoon in China.
John. 棒球, as we learned yesterday, which means baseball.
棒球.
场, the third tone. It means field.
场.
Field.
棒球场, baseball diamond.
棒球场, baseball diamond.
Next comes...
See its radiation field, it would be about the size of 3 full moons next to each other. And the conditions there are like the immediate aftermath of a detonated thermonuclear bomb. So any spacecraft flying there have to somehow survive in that radiation. And part of the challenge involved how do we not die when we get there. It's the first in a series of spacecraft that are going to explore this world. It's going to characterize the nature of the surface, the nature of the subsurface. It's going to map the ice shell in 3 dimensions. It's going to tell you everything you need to know about the ocean, everything you need to know about the land. You know what it looks like, but we don't know what the surface looks like. So this thing is going to answer all of those questions.
Author David W. Brown. Helen Scales, this must be right up your street.
Oh, I'm so excited for this. I really am. In my book, actually, I write about Enceladus, Saturn's moon and Jupiter's moon Europa as being 2 places where life could quite possibly have also evolved elsewhere in the universe because of these oceans. And specifically also they have black smokers, hydrothermal vents, which form associated with this tectonic activity that David mentioned. And it's a leading theory of how life evolved here on Earth. We have 3 billion-year-old fossils, which hint that maybe these were the places where living cells first sparked into life.
But we haven't explored those places on Earth yet. Why bother going to Jupiter's moon when we don't know the depths of our own oceans?
Well, I think we need to do both. I really do. I think there's a lot we can interchange between space exploration and deep sea exploration, and I think we need to do both. We absolutely need to explore the hydrothermal vents we have here on our planet and find out more about the theory of life here. But I also find it very exciting that could happen elsewhere, and the fact they're going to do it is pretty bold and crazy. But why not?
Helen Scales and Samira Raffaele are the guests here on Weekend from the BBC World Service.
What is your obsession? What is your obsession, Officer Chomo? Why are you so hung up on us?